it's always super hard to find people to do sports with. So why don't we do like a social network to find people to do sports with?
Hi everyone, welcome to the Halftime Snacks podcast, a place where we snack about interesting topics in sports, business, technology, and everything in between. Let's get to it! Joining us today for the Halftime Snacks is a lawyer, a sports enthusiast, and an entrepreneur. Coming to the show all the way from Cancun, he's the CEO and co-founder of Journey, a platform used to organize and promote sports through technology. His mission is to democratize sports using network effects to improve insurance, marketing, and management in sports. This man accepted my invitation to the show with no doubts. Ladies and gentlemen, Oscar Garza.
Hey, nice. It's nice to meet you, Ronan.
You know, every single time that I meet an entrepreneur, I'm really curious to know their story. I would love to start our conversation today by talking about your background. How did you come up with Journey? What was the pain point you wanted to solve?
I've always been really into sports since I was a little boy. I was in the Mexican team for fencing. Then I make a transition for Taekwondo. When I was studying the law degree in Mexico City, I was doing mountaineering and mountain climbing. So, I've always been really passionate about sports. And on the last year of my law career, I had one of my best friends. He was from Tec de Monterrey, and in Tec de Monterrey, they are really like into entrepreneurship. And he was, just saying like, we should start a business. We should start a business. And I was like, hey, well, I had this idea that for all the sports that I do, from ice hockey to fencing, it's always super hard to find people to do sports with. So why don't we do like a social network to find people to do sports with? And he was like, well, that sounds cool. So we started working, and he started coding. We started, doing the idea of what we wanted to do. And after a year of work, we came out with this like really wacky social network that it was to find people to do mountaineering with. And even though it was awful, it was like really, really MVP, it actually worked. I could always find people to do mountaineering with, and, I was delighted. But from there on, we were like, okay, well, now we need to make money out of this. So what's the next step forward? So we started to see if we could get into other like adjacent services. How could we like monetize the idea? And the first idea we had was to get into an OTA. OTA is an online travel agency. So we already had all this community for mountaineering. So we thought like, well, we could get the guides in here and then just like get a commission for every sale we do through a platform. That took us like 6 months to make. And it was working. It was selling. We already had some investment at that point. But it was not scalable at any point because, there was not a problem there to be solved. Like all the guides could sell through Facebook. Like people didn't care paying in cash. So there was no need for the actual marketplace. So we started saying, well, our core mission is to get people doing sports. That's what we really love. We're really passionate about doing sports, about getting people active. So what can we actually solve? That was the next question we posed. And we found that sports schools, the regular football teacher, the Taekwondo dojang, all those kind of businesses, they really had terrible management. So the next thing we did is to transform the OTA that was, this like payment gateway that had like online payments to get into subscriptions. So we create the platform that any sports school, regardless of the size, regardless of the money, could get into subscription model for all the students to actually subscribe to the class. And we started getting the fees like they could not collect. They were like 30%. So they didn't collect 30% of the revenue because they had such a mismanagement. And we got that to 5%. So from there, we started growing. And it was good, but we only got like a 5% margin out of the whole thing. And it was like incredible job, like too much job. And When looking for other types of ways to monetize the network that we already had, where we had athletes, we had clubs, federations, all these kind of people that were using our payment platform, we started looking for other problems that athletes had. And we noticed that there's this thing called INEGI. It's the National Authority for Statistical Things in Mexico. So they do all the polls, all the polling in Mexico. And they have a special poll for sports inclusion in the country. And in that poll, they say that the third largest cause for sport abandonment in the country was actually injuries, sport injuries. And, I being a ex-taekwondo high-performance athlete, I got my jaw broken on the New York Open, the 2015 New York Open. And it was really painful and it was really expensive. The only reason I could afford it is because I had insurance. So it's like, okay, well, for any risk, the obvious answer is insurance. So let's see how's the sport insurance industry in Mexico and see what can we disrupt there. And well, when we actually dig into it, we were horrified. The sport insurance in Mexico is practically non-existent. Only 4% of the athletes in Mexico has any type of sport insurance. And this is terrible because when people get injured, they cannot pay, they cannot afford to get treatment. Therefore, they just leave sports and that's it. That's why they abandon sports. So we really get into insurance. We started looking into it. How did the industry work? I mean, I'm a lawyer, so I kind of know the law part of it. But when getting into the business part of it, we noticed that there's this thing it's called group insurance. The larger a group, the lower the cost for the insurance. So if you go as a individual athlete to get sport coverage, yeah, you will need to pay a lot of money for it. But if you go as a huge group of athletes and get coverage for the same thing, then the cost exponentially declines because there's less cost for acquisition on the insurance side. So there's where you get the cuts from cost. So we were like, well, we have a market network. We can use that market network to bargain a huge group insurance and get the cost down and accessible for people. So we did that. And yeah, people start buying the insurance and we start talking with big V2V, sport federations. I mean, the Mexican Taekwondo Federation has 150,000 athletes, just them. And there are 60 sports federations in the country. So yeah, it kind of climbs. There's a lot of people doing sports in this country. So we start talking with the business, we start talking with the athletes, they start buying the product. And from there on, it was how can we make this even better? And right now we are currently developing solution for claims and for better subscription, for better underwriting, and for better service. So yeah, let's summarize that whole thing. The problem was that people could not afford insurance. The solution, we use the market network to get the cost of insurance to a payable level. The defensibility, well, if you want to compete against us, you really need to have a bigger group than us. And we're not staying still now. So for every single athlete that we get into the platform, we get a really defensible thing because their annual insurance contracts last for a year, which they will not jump from one company to another during the whole year. So it's a little bit of a winner takes it all. And I kind of love it because, as an entrepreneur, when you kind of see these blue ocean opportunities, you just gotta throw yourself, like we say in Spanish, como gorda en tobogán.
Wow, it really sounds like the opportunity of building a community before was one of the factors that influenced towards adapting yourself to the new idea, to pivoting to insurance. And that kind of grabbed the market of athletes without insurance quickly. And I think we're going to touch a little bit further on that. But I want to ask you a little bit about the platform behind Journey itself, the technical side of it. So how are you leveraging technology to connect between sports and insurance?
Well, the first thing you got to know is that technology is on service of the actual need, of the actual problem. We're not using AI. We're not using huge new things. We're not using buzzwords. We're using plain old technology, but in creative ways to make better connections. The thing about social networks or marketplaces or market networks, as in our case, is not actually the complication of the technology, but the way the underlying connections between point A, user A and user B, coexist. So of course, in order to guarantee there's like a fluidity in that connection, you need to be really knowledgeable in, from Amazon Web Services, the infrastructure in which your platform runs and how it's constituted, your defense against cyber attacks, which we normally, have some every once in a while, and how to defend the content. You really need to understand how the UX, influences the behavior of the athletes, of the users in that case, and how you actually make them recurring users for the platform. So, I mean, like, what are we using? We're using, PHP, Laravel. We're using the regular thing, but in innovative ways. Now, any startup that begins, and here in Mexico, we have this really funny thing that there's not a lot of funding to go by. So in United States, I think just California has more VCs than the whole Latin America region. So you need to play the game on the rules where you're playing it. So we're not playing in the United States. We cannot get a $1.5 million seed investment for just getting into a lot of things. And so we really need to be like a guerrilla warfare and be really tactical about what we develop. First, you need to develop low tech, see if it works, and then increase the complexity of the tech where you're using. So what's right now in the oven for us tech-wise? We are starting to hire our data science team because, we're doing insurance. One of the big things in insurance are claims when people actually get injured and, they need to use insurance. And we don't want people to do that. So the next big question that we're doing is how can we understand the specific claims rate according to a specific cohort, to a specific, specific sport, and see how can we influence the behavior of our users in order to lower the accidents. That it's a win-win-win. The insurance company wins because it has to pay less claims. We win because we can get a better prime for every insurance sold, and the athlete wins because they get less injuries and they can get to be more on the field and less on the hospital there. So how do you actually get the connection with data science, and how do you influence the behavior with content and a little bit of AI? How do you deliver the content in one moment, in one time, and in order to measure it against the actual total claims that we do? So that's in the oven right now. There's other things that we need to improve, like the customer experience on the claims, using chatbots in order to, instead of, we're millennials, we don't really want to call anybody. I feel like cringe every once that I need to call for pizza. So I don't really want to call nobody, not even for the insurance thing. So if we can get chatbots in order to automatize the whole claim process, to make it seamless, to improve the customer journey, well, that's a big win-win. But, chatbots is not rocket science. I mean, it's AI, but it's not rocket science. So we're getting into that. And we're also getting into more like a distribution side things, SEO, that kind of things, which is not really rocket science too, but needs to be addressed.
I really want to emphasize on what you said of, using classic technology, but using it in a creative way. I think that's key, and many of founders and entrepreneurs kind of get a little bit scared before they even get into the technology, because they're like, oh, we got to use machine learning and we got to use AI and the most advanced software out there. But it's not really true. You can have so many functionalities in the simple stuff as long as you are creative with it. So I think that's really interesting, and I appreciate what you said about it, Oscar. And now that you mention it, insurance is actually something that, at least in Mexico, there's barely any culture around it in insurance. In the United States or in Europe, maybe they have a culture of paying for insurance, having insurance, being safe and transferring the risk. But it is one, if not the hardest products to sell. So I'm curious to know, what are some of the challenges that you faced while convincing people to get insurance specifically for their sports practices?
So first, let me give you a little bit of context on how big is the problem of insurance in Mexico. So in the United States, 67% of the US citizens have health insurance from a private source. So that's 67%. In Mexico, is 4%. So yeah, we are lacking. But in order to understand why that's true, we really need to understand why people don't buy it. And the main reason why people don't buy it is just plain old costs. So even in the National Polling Authority, they say it, when they poll people, they say, I cannot buy it. I know I need it, but I can just not pay it. The regular health insurance in Mexico is worth three full salaries, like monthly wages of the average worker. So when you need to dedicate 30% of your annual earnings to insurance, yeah, you will not be doing that. So that really marginalize 80% of the population in this country and only gives access to about 20% of the population. But from there, there's a lot of the addressable market. There is 20% of the population, but then you get other marketing efficiencies that drive it out to 4%. So in particular, how do we convince people that they need sports? Well, I will say they don't even need convincing. When you're let's give you an example. When you're a boxing athlete, well, every day you are just punching things, you're being punched, you go to competitions. The main objective of the competition is to knock your opponent out by punching him in the head. They understand the risk. It's really tangible to them. Noses get broken, hands get broken. There's a lot of pain to it. And whenever we just tell them, we have an accessible solution for you, they really get into it. You don't need to pay $800 a year for the insurance. I sell it to you at $15 a year. Well, there's not much selling to do there. And the product actually works. The thing that we actually need to do is to educate them on what we are selling, because everyone has a vague notion of what insurance is. Yeah, you pay money, and if something happens to you, they pay it to you. But there are, the devil is in the details. There are a lot of tiny, minutiae details that athletes really need to understand what they're buying into. And just creating the content, forging the language, educating them, using webinars, using the federations in order to better address the athletes is the way we are actually educating the athletes on the need for buying insurance, but more what they're buying into. And I think our hardest challenge, because of course we do have a lot of challenges, is that many people don't think this is true. So they've never heard a proposition like this. They've never they thought insurance is this really expensive thing that they cannot afford. And when we come with a, almost unbelievable, too good to be true proposition for them, well, they don't really get into the basics of the market of how group insurance works and how we can use technology to lower the cost per acquisition on the insurance side, to lower the prime rates. And they don't get into that. They think this is a scam. So yeah, how do we create, trust in the other side? Well, we can do it through the federation. So federations, normally when they talk to me and they see our company and they talk with other federations that are already our clients, well, it's a pretty easy sale to do. B2B is really easy sale to do. B2C, on the other hand, more difficult. So when we need to actually get into the small little athlete, the individual athlete, and how do we convince them? Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the public relations side. And we're working with the two insurance carriers that we have, that it's Sura and Chof. Sura is from Colombia, really big insurance carriers in Latin America. Chubb is from Switzerland, really big insurance carrier in the whole world. So yeah, they're like really respectable brands. They're getting our product into their websites in order for whenever they ask me, how can I trust your company? I just send them to the insurance side. So that's a easier way to trust, to generate trust. And there's, the public relations side, all that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's still a puzzle, has not been solved. We really need to work on it, but that's 20% of the population. We're still selling.
It sounds like the key to selling insurance in Mexico is get them into groups, because that makes it cheaper and then accessible for everyone else. And I want to ask you, with the current shift in sports practices due to the pandemic, now suddenly everyone wants to practice sports in a safe environment. So what are you guys expecting? How do you think the dynamics in team sport and personal fitness will change in the long run due to the pandemic? And is there a way you'll be looking to benefit from these changes? What do you think about it?
There are winners, there are losers with this pandemic. We kind of don't care, because at the end of the day, we can ensure people training at their homes or training at the gym. So for us, it's, their risk is more or less the same. So yeah, we're still selling. On the side of the gyms, on the side of the federations, on the side of the, online trainers, there are big shifts going on. The big winner from this quarantine, of course, are industries like InstaFit. You should totally make a podcast with them. There are beautiful people there. Of course, they had this business model pre-quarantine where they had an audience, and they just gave like online training to the audience. We will be seeing a lot of that in the near future, and they're already making a good time for themselves. A lot of gyms are getting into digitizing their services, going online, of course. But it's not that easy to just do it. Like when you were like, I don't know, sports world, and then you just want to change everything and become online, because there are all underlying reasons why one business model is really different to another. So one business model is subscription for the InstaFit kind of, online business. And it might appear that for a gym, the business model will be also subscription, because you actually pay month to month. But that's not the case. The case is that you pay month to month to use the equipment. So their business case is more about getting all the right equipment in the right place, and then leasing it, almost like, well, not leasing it, but giving access through a monthly fee to the users. That's a really different thing, because users are expecting equipment. They're not expecting the service of being taught how to do the exercise. So yeah, there will be some challenges there. For the Olympic sports, I mean, I just don't see how things can be changed like in the long run. Perhaps with the audience, perhaps with their venues, but in the sports itself, they cannot really be changed that much, because people need to train where the equipment is. You cannot just train track on your house. That's not how that works. So yeah, gyms, tracks, that kind of specialized training places will remain open. Exhibition sports like dancing or katas in karate or taekwondo, yeah, they will go online, of course. There will be a lot of businesses doing live streams of events for people to not get into the venues and consume it online. But for the athletes, there will not be much change there. But I really think, even though if we find like the vaccine and everything works out right and everything goes to normality, there will be more streamlined. There will be more people doing exercise in their homes. There will be more InstaFits in the world.
I think maybe there's also an opportunity in the pandemic, because it's creating consciousness around, being safe. So maybe now people would be like, okay, so I'm going to go practice maybe soccer. It would be a good idea to maybe hire an insurance about it, so I'm safer regardless of getting sick by COVID or something. I just want to be safer.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's a really important motivating factor for the sales that we're currently doing, and for the federations we're currently selling at. Of course, there's more, how you say that, there's more focus on how to be safe while practicing sports. And yeah, part of that equation, of course, is insurance. So that's a big win for us, but also will be on how actually people like get into safer environments. So we also have that side of the business where we are helping people get the content they need to actually practice safely sports, and also informing the federations and the clubs and the gyms the best safety measures in order to avoid injuries.
That's great, Oscar. And my last question is a more personal one, but it's more about like getting your spirit as an entrepreneur and knowing what you're made of. So if you could have a billboard or a sign, a big sign, which would be seen by millions of people every day, what would you write on it, and why would you write those words?
You know, I'm be accountable. Like I'll just write things, perhaps not the same thing every day, but more about accountability. Like accept when you're wrong. Like understand that you will not be right the first time. Like take risk and prepare to fail. Prepare for your worst cases scenario and actually live it. And get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That kind of thing. So I'll just like try to write things for people to understand that things are, the world's not fair and you really need to move. And if you don't move, well, then the entropy will get the best out of you. At the end of the day, at least here in Latin America, I think living in US, Canada is like living on easy mode. Living in Europe is like living on medium mode, medium difficulty. Living in Latin America, now that's hard mode. Well, there are other places, of course, Southeast Asia and Africa, they're also hard mode there. But yeah, like things will not get better by themselves. We need to actually improve them, or we will remain as we are, and we really need to get into a better position.
I would say that that's a legendary way of ending the show. So thank you so much for sharing your story on today's Halftime Snack. I'm super happy we had this chat, and it was great to have you on the show, Oscar.
Ronan, it was a pleasure being on this podcast. Best of luck.
Before you leave, I want to thank you for listening. To hear these or any other Halftime Snack, check out the full archive on my website, which you can find on the show notes. See you next week!